Yes, sir, we are live now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I would like to talk about comedy. Uh, Comedy is included in your syllabus, uh, fifth sem syllabus. Uh, so, the specific term that is mentioned in your syllabus is that the literary terms related to comedy. There are so many literary terms related to comedy, but I think what is most important is the uh, collective genre, that is comedy is most important rather than the subsequent parts or the smaller parts related to comedy. Comedy is a kind of dramatic genre, uh, like tragedy and other genres. Comedy, novel, uh, prose fiction, essays, so on and so forth. When you talk about genre, you put something in a particular box, you cover something up in a wrap up mode to make it a shape kind of uh, picture, to make it something stagnant. When you put something in a box, it cannot go outside the box, it should be protected by the packet. Similarly, if you define comedy by a particular definition, you restrict comedy to that particular definition. Now the question arises, is there any cumulative definition? Is there any pure definition to define comedy or tragedy or any literary genre? No. Why no? Because when you put something in a stereotyped condition, you make it stagnant, you make it stereotyped, you make it stand still. But it is quite unlikely to the current trend of literature. So if you have to uncover the true nature of any genre, true nature of any definition, you have to uncover it, you have to unfold it to know the true nature of anything else. Similarly, comedy is a dramatic genre, as you know, but as the ages went by, it has developed and certain elements have added to it to make it uh, a multi-literary aspect of comedy. So it is not the comedy that is restricted to that particular definition of comedy, or it is not tragedy which is restricted to the definition of tragedy given by Aristotle. So my topic: comedy definition, origin, development, characteristics, and types. Uh, I would like to begin with the definition of tragedy. Uh, as I told you, I am against this kind of definition. Still, somewhere I have to begin. When I would like to begin something, I have to take shelter under the banner of definition. But I'll tell you why definition is insignificant and why definition is very stereotyped and why it is not necessary to be confined to the circle of definition. Look, what is tragedy? I simply mention tragedy simply because to make a contrast and compare with comedy. Otherwise, you cannot concentrate on comedy solely. Number one. Number two, Aristotle in his Poetics defined tragedy mostly, but he somehow neglected the aspects of comedy in his Poetics. There is a single chapter assigned to comedy, but most of the chapters of that particular book called Poetics was ascribed to or were ascribed to tragedy. The definition of Aristotle, the definition of tragedy, according to Aristotle, goes like this: a tragedy then is an imitation of an action uh, that is serious, also as having magnitude, complete in itself. Complete means it should have a beginning, middle, and end. In language with pleasurable accessories, language should be elevated, language should be grand, language should be uh, up to the mark. Not the language of everyday language or commonplace language. Each kind brought in separately in parts of the work. The drama is divided into 5 segments, 5 parts, and in a dramatic, not in a narrative form. And tragedy should be written in a dramatic form, not in a narrative form, with incidents arousing pity and fear. Why pity and fear? Pity and fear means when we see someone is fighting and the person is right and the action is right, we feel sympathy for that particular person. But when some unfortunate event has happened to that particular person, we feel pity for that particular person because we related ourselves to that particular person. And fear, when some unfortunate event, when some misfortune happened to that particular person, we also fear not simply the danger of that particular person, but the thinking that this kind of unfortunate events or this kind of misfortune may befall upon us. That's why we feel fear. These are the two reasons to feel fear. While to accomplish its catharsis, such emotion. Catharsis means purgation. The cleansing, the purgation of these emotions. When you go to a theater hall and you watched a theater, say for example Macbeth, and when you left the theater, if the play did not end in such a way, in a reconciliating manner, in a resolution, then you go outside the theater and you commit that kind of crime. So it is among the dramatic principles to concentrate the play not solely on the plot, not solely on the language, not solely on the seriousness of the action, but also it is necessary to complete the play in a very complete manner and to erase the emotions to some extent. Otherwise, the persons who enter the theater hall might go outside and commit the same crime as Macbeth did to Duncan. So this is the definition given by Aristotle in his Poetics. In chapter 15 of the Poetics, Aristotle lays down 4 requirements for dramatic characters. They should be good. The dramatic characters should be good. They should be appropriate. They should be like the reality. They should be consistent even in inconsistency. So these are the 4 cardinal features which should be ascribed to the tragic hero. Now, I come to the definition of comedy. Both comedy and tragedy, Aristotle argues, seek to represent the world mimetically. But whereas tragedy is an imitation of an action that is admirable, complete, possesses magnitude, set in the world of people of substance, comedy deals with people who are low by nature. Just as tragedy deals with people of higher rank, people of blue blood, people from the royal family. Comedy deals with the people of the low status, by low nature. Comedy is an imitation of an inferior people, not however with respect to every kind of defect. The laughable is a species of what is disgraceful. The laughable is an error or disgrace that does not involve pain or destruction. For example, a comic mask is ugly and distorted but does not involve any pain. So comedy is something that arises out of the distortion, out of the inversion of something known. Say for example, you are walking on a station and suddenly you saw that a man was falling down. Why? Because he was slipped over the spillover, slipped over the leftover of the bananas. And suddenly this incident makes you laugh. But immediately after the incident has happened, you realize that the man has wounded badly. And you stopped laughing and you go to that particular man and stretch your hand for help. So look at the incident from 2 angles. The first incident, the falling of that particular man suddenly makes you laugh. You would take pleasure from that particular incident. Parallelly, when you stretch your hand for that man, for hell, you feel pity for that particular person, which is a characteristic of tragedy. So both these things, both these emotions occur together. That means both tragedy and comedy are complementary terms, both binary terms. You cannot say that tragedy is just the opposite of comedy or the vice versa. Both terms are complementary because, say for example, day night or laughter or cry. If you, when you laugh, you know the emotion of love, the elements of love, the passion of love, the pleasure that love can attribute to you. But when you laugh, in the unconscious mind or subconscious mind, you must be aware that you know what is the meaning of crying. The word love itself does not exist without the existence of the word cry. If you know the meaning of laughter, you also know in your subconscious mind or conscious mind that there is something called cry. If you do not know the passion of laughter, you are quite unable to understand the passion of crying. Similarly, in this context, if you do not know the aspects of tragedy, the elements of tragedy, the passion of tragedy, you cannot understand the passion of comedy. So you cannot say that the comedy is just the opposite of tragedy. Comedy is just the denigratory form of tragedy. A comedy is just the neglected form of tragedy. No, that is not the case. Both terms are binary terms, both complement each other, both supported each other. Etymological origin of comedy. Actually, comedy originated in Athens, ancient Greece. Aristotle's comedy is a non-violent form conceived primarily in terms of derogation, inferiority, error, and disgrace. Comedy is an imitation of the ridiculous and unworthy aspects of human behavior, where little of real significance passes on stage. Inferiority amounts to a failure to uphold moral virtues. Ideally, tragedy depicts the declining fortune of an individual, which is not due to a moral defect or depravity, but to an error of some kind, but inevitably leads to the death or to the experience of something terrible. Look at the example of Macbeth. Comedy, on the other hand, ends happily. Conflicts are resolved. In comedy, even people who are the bitterest enemies in the story go off, reconcile in the end, and no one gets killed by anybody else. A clue to its beginning may be found in the etymology of the word, which is generally agreed to be derived from an amalgamation of the Greek words komos and komai and oda. These are the three words. They are solely responsible for the derivation of comedy that reflect comedy roots in the Greek peninsula. Komos translates as revel, while komais comes from the word village. Aristotle preferred the second definition, remarking that the Dorians called outlying villages, the outskirt villages, the countryside, komai, the assumption being that comedians are so called not from the reveler commerce, but because they toured the villages when expelled from the town in disgrace. When those people are expelled from the town and they went to the villages and to perform comedies. Oda is uncontroversially translated as song. So comedy is either a hymn of celebration or, as Dante styled it, a rustic song. Most of the critics and historians agreed that comedy appears to be the product of a rural environment rather than an urban one. It is a countryside product. It is not the product of the city or town. And one have come into being in association with the seasonal agrarian fertility rites. At some stage, comedy also began a long association with the god Dionysus, whose divine characteristics and patronage are clearly impressed on the throne. Actually, comedy originated during the worship of Dionysus. Dionysus is the word of wine in Greek culture. The worshippers of Dionysus gathered in a particular place and they worshipped Dionysus by drinking, by maintaining a procession, carrying a banner which signifies the symbol of a phallus, the human genital organ, the penis. And at the same time, they are dancing, they are conversing with each other, they are hurling invectives, to the bystanders, to the other people, among themselves. And throughout this performance, and through this performance, comedy actually has evolved in ancient Greece. Dionysius, the son of Zeus and Semele, was originally the god of fertility of nature and vegetation spirit, who died and was reborn yearly. His cult reached Greece from earlier trace of Phrygia at around 100 BC and was particularly notable for its devotional use of wine and the orgiastic revels of the votaries. Votaries means worshippers, specifically women who withdrew into the wild to make contact with nature. Dionysius was often described as having a minor character, Hales, from where the word comes, phallus. The temperament and the qualities of Dionysius and the nature of his worship appeared then to have exerted a significant influence on the principles of festivity, inversion, relative sexual freedom, travesty, and we find in comedy. Also significant is the removal from the city he encourages, placing him at the fringes of the civic environment and drawing his followers away from urban jurisdiction, inducting them into conduct that would be unacceptable in the city. Echoes of these Dionysian themes can be heard in Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare, and there
Sir, there is a bit of audio issues coming, sir. Can you please repeat? There's a bit of audio issue from your end.
is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
These two places are simply important because of the enactment of two types of plays. Great Dionysia was simply famous for the enactment of the tragedies of those ancient Greeks, notably the tragedies of Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Euripides. And Lernia was used for the performance of the comedies, and most all of them are performed in a competitive manner. And there were the judges who judged the plays based on their quality of the content, quality of the performance, quality of the chorus, and so many paraphernalia. And at the end of that competition, a prize was awarded to the great performance of the plays. Initially, the Dionysia, the more important of the two, were only for the tragedies, with comedies performed only at the Winter Linnea. From around 486 BC, a comedy competition was initiated at Dionysia, at the point at which we may say that comedy is institutionalized as a significant literary form. It was widely assumed that Aristotle intended or had already written a companion volume. This is important because most of us are aware of the fact that Aristotle wrote poetics simply for the simply to deliberate on tragedy, but there was no single book on comedy. It was mentioned that he wrote a text on comedy, and the name is Tractatus Concilianius, which outlines the construction of jokes. Catalogs of types of the comic characters may offer an insight into the content, but its own provenance is uncertain, being variously hailed as the key to Aristotle's views on comedy and denounced as a sorry Byzantine fabrication. But unfortunately, the book was lost. So, comedy isn't dark. So, there is no specific definition, there is no specific categorization, there is no specific means to attain a complete picture of comedy. So, these are some of the quotes to understand what is comedy. The first quote goes like this: perhaps even if nothing else today has any future, our laughter may yet have a future, according to Friedrich Nietzsche. Look at the second quotation, very funny and humorous quotation. Tragedy is when I cut my finger. Tragedy is when I cut my finger. Comedy is when you fall down and open sewer. Sewer means the underground tunnel and die. So this simple quote, gives you the simple definition of comedy and tragedy. Tragedy is something that when I cut my finger, and comedy is when you fall down and open sewer and die. So these are the quotes. There are two other quotes by Stephen Wright and Woody Allen. I also mentioned here the definition of comedy from the anthology of David Mickix, literary anthology of David Mickix. So this is the generic definition of comedy. Comedy is, along with the tragedy, is one of the two most familiar kinds of drama. It's associated with the revelry, festive celebrations of the return of spring, carnival and folly, and acceptance of chaos and right, of the world turned topsy-turvy, remains permanently allied to comic spirit. Okay. Next. These are some of the qualities or characteristics of comedy taken from poetics. Comic characters may be stupid, silly, pointedly unattractive, but not evil. There is no serious damage, no moral harm implied by Aristotle's words. The comic mask is distorted, but not with pain. Moreover, the Greek word for ugly means shameful, as well as testifying to an ugly association between a comedy and shaming or mocking of people, between the comic and the embarrassment. This slide describes the expression of comedy from different persons. According to philosopher Henry Bergson, comedy achieves its effect from the depiction of humans as strangely automatic, machine-like in their behavior. Think about the character of Charlie Chaplin, Mr. Bean. All manner of mannerisms expresses us or squeeze expressions out of us. Charlie Chaplin, Lucille Ball, working at the assembly line, try to accommodate themselves to regular motions of the industrial system and themselves become jerking, blinking machines. In comedy, we can find ourselves turned into a Rube Goldberg device. What we thought was natural suddenly looks artificial. Here, I would like to point out the festival of Dionysia, which was solely responsible for the emergence of comedy and certain characteristic features of comedy. Comic plots tend to end in marriage, and the promise of an offstage wedding or the reunion of a married but estranged couple. A wedding party connects the union of two people with a larger festive union, a high-spirited party. Comedy frequently ends in marriage. Why? Why comedy frequently ends in marriage or union or resolution or reconciliation? Because with its suggestion of future children contains the hint of human regeneration, a basic comic principle. When comedy ends, it ends happily simply because it promises some future hope. Whereas in tragedy, you cannot find any hope. When Macbeth was murdered and the play ends, there will be no hope. There is only a kind of apprehension that this kind of incident might happen to all of us. But how can we redress this problem? How can we tackle this problem? How can we control our emotion so that this kind of tragedy might not happen to us? And so on and so forth. These are the characteristics of tragedy. I'll not go to the details of the characteristics of tragedy. Shortcomings with the effects of the hero is often isolated, the hero realizes errors too late. The ending is mournful, nearly everyone dies. Look at the picture, it is a picture of three witches of Macbeth. And they are solely responsible for the tragedy of Macbeth. But remember, Macbeth is also a comedy from the perspective of the witches, because they think that they are taking pleasure through the incidents of the entire story. they gave instructions to Macbeth, and Macbeth acted accordingly and demanded or produced his uh, fate. These are the characteristics of comedy. Look at the picture. The picture is taken from 12th Night, the Calling of Malvolio. Malvolio is indulging himself too much. He is romantically indulging, and the other characters are watching him. Look at the characteristics. There is emphasis placed upon the idiosyncrasies of the character that can affect human renewal. The act moves toward freedom or renewal. There is so much human high spirits, etc. Ending is usually light, happy, and positive. There's a difference between comedy and tragedy. I cannot go to that in detail. Differences from different perspectives, purposes, conflicts, language, view, ending. These are the graphs, the tragic graphs, the exposition of the play. You must put this graph in context of any tragedy, be it Macbeth or Oedipus Rex. It's the exposition scene, exciting events, rising action, climax, the murder of Duncan, and in context of Oedipus Rex, when Oedipus came to know that he killed his father and married his own mother. So the climax comes in Oedipus Rex at the recognition of this particular fact. And then following action. Following action means after the murder of Duncan, the morally degenerated Macbeth gradually declines, Lady Macbeth also gradually declines, and catastrophe, the murder of Macbeth. And at the end of Oedipus Rex, Oedipus left the palace and went to a forest. This structure, this graph was presented by Freytag as a critic, and he beautifully explained the graph. The Act 1 is the exposition, inciting moment. Act 2 is the rising action, complication of the incident, complication of the plot, complication of the story. Act 3 is the climax, reversal, the following action. Act 4 is the following, deals with following action, and final suspense. Act 5 is the denouement. You usually know that a play should have 5 acts, and this graph is prepared due to this due to the theory of Aristotle of 5 acts. Look, this is a graph of comic action graph. It is quite similar to tragedy exposition. I think you must have gone through Pot of Gold. Look at the exposition. The exposition was described by the Lar Familiaris, who is the household god, the rising action, and the complication of the action, climax. When Eucleo's pot of gold has been stolen, and this is the climax of that play. And the following action, Euclio gradually degenerates and ruminates fervently about his stolen treasure and denouement. And at the end, the play ends with the marriage of Lyconides and his daughter called Phaedra. This is Greek tragic comedy. Actually, comedy originated in Greece, and the first Greek poet was Epicharmus, the earliest of the Greek comic poets. And philosopher was a Sicilian who flourished at the Syracuse at the early 15th century. His comedies apparently included mythological travesties, plays presenting conflicts between non-human abstractions and personifications, and more realistic comedies about contemporary life. Greek comedy has been divided in 3 segments. Old comedy, it was solely represented by the comedies of the Aristophanes. Comedy at Athens developed from the worship of Dionysus, the god of wine. Aristotle states that comedy originated with the leader of the phallic processions carrying a pole on which was a representation of the phallus. The phallic element in the old comedy, and specifically the god, the actor, appears to be derived from the non-choral Dorian force of mind. The fact that So many choruses of the 15th century Attic comedy were disguised as animal, implies that the animal mask world lies at the very basis of the old comedy. So these are the features of old comedy. And one of the exponent of old comedy was Aristophanes. Uh, his only 11 plays had survived. Uh, Among them, there are many. Uh, Cloud, Lysistrata, Peace, uh, frogs, birds, wasps, etc. And he deals with different aspects of literature, philosophy, politics, etc. The other playwrights included on that particular period: Philonides, Xenophon Autocrates, Apollophanes, etc. Middle comedy. Look at the time frame: 404, 436 BC. Middle comedy was essentially a period of transition, plays of fantasy and ineffective, played for a time, but more and more, and they became supplanted by the travesty and social comedy. Unlike tragedy, which after the 15th century became mediocre and conventional, comedy continued to develop and change. It remained extremely popular in Athens throughout the 3rd and 5th centuries. Hundreds of plays were produced, but not a single complete scene had survived. The extant plays were the perfumer, the doll maker, the jeweler, the twins, the sister, the miser, the misanthrope. I would not go to the details of the middle comedy because I have something to say at the end of this presentation, which was very crucial, so that I go a little bit fast. The outstanding playwrights of the middle comedy were Antiphons and Alexis. Some of the quotes, some of the fragments are taken from the plays of Antiphons and Alexis. Uh, Look, a blind man, this is a quote from Antiphons: a blind man suffers many evils, but he has one blessing: he cannot see a woman. So look, this is the misogynistic outlook of Antiphons that has revealed here. And the other playwrights of that middle period include Nicophon, Eubulus, Philippus, the son of Aristophanes, etc. Now we come to the new comedy. New comedy was completely new, and it was written based on the family types of comedy: social comedy. Uh, Look, the conquest of Alexander has opened up large portions of the world to the Greeks, and the Athenians developed a more cosmopolitan outlook. The breakdown of the local patriotism and the lack of the civic duties led to many of the pursuit of wealth and pleasure, while others sought spiritual values in the philosophical creeds, which enabled them to uh, rise above externals and achieve mastery of themselves by the use of reason and pursuit of virtue. So these are the conditions, these are the socioeconomic conditions that produced new comedy. The important playwrights of that particular period were Diphilus, Philomen, and Menander. Most importantly, Menander was important. He was the representative playwright of new comedy. Other playwrights were Philippides, Posidippus, Apollodorus, Charistus, Theocritus, etc. Features and fragments of new comedy. This is the features. As I told you, new comedy deals with the family types. The main characters are mainly family types: husbands, wives, slaves, sons, and daughters, but all are sympathetically portrayed as individuals. The slave takes part in action, but is not the intriguing slave of plot in comedy. He is faithful, sometimes stupid, and on occasions causes troubles inadvertently. Soldiers, parasites, slave dealers, prostitutes, cooks appear in plays. They too are treated as human beings, not as caricatures. Some of the beautiful quotes from Menander: a man's character is known from his talk, and love for money is the root of all evil, according to Apollodorus. The structure of old comedy. I do not talk much about the structure of old comedy because it takes a lot of time. Just I would like to briefly mention the aspects of the structure of old comedy. It begins with prologue, parodos, it is the entry of the chorus, agon, it is the formal debate among the characters, parabasis is the formal feature of old comedy, It is actually the unnatural break in the action and is performed by the chorus with the actors off stage and is aimed at the spectators who are often addressed directly. Episodes are inserted or permitted into the entire scene or plot. Songs are inserted and etc. This is the end of the play uh, of old comedy. Look at the picture. Sometimes the play ends with the dancing.
Sir, your audio is not visible, sir. Audio is not clear, sir. Hello. Hello. Omlan sir has left the meeting, but I would ask you all to stay because I think he has certain sort of network issues that is bothering him and his class. I will let him join once more. Please stay. স্যার আপনি ডিসকানেক্টেড হয়ে গেছেন, আপনি ওই লিঙ্কটা দিয়ে আরেকবার জয়েন করুন। Sir has joined. Sir, your microphone is off. So please kindly unmute yourself.
Am I audible to all?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Okay, sorry for the inconvenience created for the disconnection of internet. Okay. Is my screen visible to all?
Yes, sir.
Is my screen
Yes,
visible?
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Where shall I end? Okay. The emergence of Roman drama. Actually, Rome did not have any literature. When they conquered Carthage, they came into contact with the Greek literature and they tried to imitate the Greek literature, and they composed their own literature. But there are two accounts we can mention: Horace's account and the account of Livy. And they pointed out how gradually they imitated the Greek material and produced a new kind of literature, which is only new to the Roman people and their country. Mention should be made of certain dramatic types of early Roman dramatic types, specifically the comedy, the Fescennine verses. It was mentioned by Horace in his account in Epistles. And there was the account of Livy. Livy, in his History of Rome, mentioned the development of Roman comedy from Fescennine verses to Satura, and then Fabula Attilana, etc. These are the early comic performances of the Roman civilization. The mime was one of the earliest Roman performances. The Italian mime is said to have reached Rome not later than 2000 BC. And it was introduced by Decimus Laberius and Publilius Cyrus. Next, it is the component of mime, the definition of mime and characteristics. Mime is an imitation of speech and action without reverence, a lascivious imitation of shameful deeds and words. The mime was regarded as the imitative as par excellence. It sought to imitate life in all aspects. Look at the best known example of mime is the Charlie Chaplin movies. If you have gone through the movies of Charlie Chaplin, you will perfectly understand what is mime. Look, these are the pictures of mime. These are the characteristics of mime. I cannot go to that part in detail. Roman comedy and the notable Roman comedians or comedy playwrights rather were Plautus, Caecilius, and Terence. Some of the plays of Plautus: Asinaria, Alularia, Captivity, Cassina, Sistellaria, etc., Miles Glorious, etc. Next comes Terence. So this is the biography of Plautus. The characteristics of Plautus' plays. Plautus' use of slave and stock character. When you go through the plays of the Pot of Gold, I think you must understand the role of the slave, how tricky they are and how they behave. There was a separate question: how the role of the slave in Pot of Gold and other plays of Plautus. Next, come to the female characters of Plautus. The characteristics of the female character. I hope you understand the conversation between Euclio and the servant and the female servant of his house, and they are exchanging their conversations, which are virulent, which are invectives, and they are very topsy-turvy condition of that particular play. Next, we come to Terence, another playwright, another Roman playwright, and Terence wrote specifically the Comedy of Manners, and he was solely important because he influenced the other generation of playwrights from other continents, other countries. Better known English in Terence was a Roman African playwright during the Roman Republic. His comedies were performed for the first time around 170 to 160 BC. There is a curious story about Terence. Terentius Lucanus, a Roman senator, brought Terence to Rome as a slave, educated him, and later on, impressed by his abilities, freed him. Terence apparently died young, probably in Greece or in his way back to Rome. All of the 6 plays of Terence wrote have survived. These are the plays of Terence, the characteristics of Terence's plays. One of the innovative features of his plays is that his omission of the prologue. Terence's omission of the expository prologue is considered by many scholars as a most important innovation, one which had far-reaching effects upon the irony and suspense in his plays. Some of his plays include Andrea, Hakira, etc. These are the dramatic trajectories. Comedy originated in Greece, then from Greece it went to Rome, and from Rome it came to Britain, and through the reference of Terence. The first English comedy was the Ralph Roister Doister, which was written written by the influence of Terence, and also it took its influence from the interlude and the morality tradition of the English plays. I cannot go to the details of Ralph Roister Doister. This is the Ralph Roister, the story of the Ralph Roister Doister, and this portion deals with the hereditary inheritance from Terence. Nicholas Woodall in Ralph Roister Doister, widely recognized at least the first comic drama in English, proudly proclaimed its classical heritage. It took its material from Terence and other classical sources. Another comic play that was produced in England was Gamergatten's Needle, and it was also notable because it deals with simply because of the loss of a precious needle and the resultant suspicions and jealousies aggravated by the merrymaking proclivities of the vice-like deacon. And the author's skill is demonstrated in the adroit manner by which he has succeeded in keeping the audience's attention alert by turns of his actions and by the vigor of his dialogue. Next, drama enters into the Elizabethan period and Jacobean period. Elizabethan Jacobean period was dominated by the plays of William Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, and other playwrights. Shakespeare comedies, I do not go to the much detail of Shakespeare because you are already acquainted with Shakespeare. Some of the plays of Shakespeare, plays marked with an asterisk are now commonly referred to as the romances. Romances are actually the comedies, the comic plays, but further distinctions are made to categorize it minutely. That's why further categorizations are needed in Shakespearean canon. Some of the plays of Shakespeare. Plays of Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson is famous for his humorous comedies. I'll come to that later on. The plays of Ben Jonson. From here onwards, I will deal with different kinds of comic forms. Commedia dell'arte. It is actually a form of comic drama developed about the mid-16th century by guilds of the professional Italian actors, playing stock characters around a given scenario. And the story of the Commedia dell'arte goes like this. In a typical play, a pair of young lovers out with a rich old father, Pantaloon, aided by a clever and intriguing servant, Harlequin, in a plot enlivened by the buffoonery of Punch and other clowns. So these are the characteristics of Commedia dell'arte. It was originated in Italy, and the notable examples of Shakespeare's time was the Taming of the Shrew, Molière the Misanthrope, etc. Next comes Commedia erudita. It is also a commedia dell'arte, but it is solely for the intellectual audiences. It is not for the common public. That's why the name is erudita, Commedia erudita. The erudita or the learned count for the Commedia dell'arte and written for the humanist course of the Italian Renaissance princess. Most plays are closely based on the new Roman comedy of Plautus and Terence, intended for educated audiences. Now I come to uh, a particular word called drag. Drag is actually not a play. It is a literary term related to comedy. When you go through 12 Nights, you observe that Viola disguised himself as a male figure and took the name of Cesario. This uh, cross-dressing, this changing of attire is actually called transvestism. Transvestism, actually called transvestism. Transvestism is to take the attire of opposite sex to play that role to solve your problem. But drag is the female impersonation. Female impersonation means when a male figure took the dress of or took the attire of a female and behaved accordingly, it is called drag. But most interesting thing in context of cross-dressing, whether it is transvestism or it is drag, is that sometimes or after acting throughout the play, they somehow transgress the border of their gender and enter into the another territory. I will give you an example from Hamlet. In the beginning of the play, Hamlet confessed to Polonius that I am feigning madness. Hamlet confessed to Polonius that I am feigning madness in order to avenge my father's murder by his uncle. But at the end of the play, Hamlet asserted to Polonius that I cannot distinguish whether I am mad or not. Actually, what happens is that when you act in a particular role, you internalize the attributes of that role and you configure yourself of that particular role, and you transgresses your border of identity and into the border of into the realm of others' identity. And at the end of the play or at the end of the entire process, somehow or other, they cannot construct their identity as they previously did. So this is the condition, this is the problem that arises due to the drag and transvestism through the medium of cross-dressing. Transvestism, as I told you, look at the picture. Actually, he's a boy. He wore the dress of a woman to play the role of a female figure. The characteristics of transvestism. Romantic comedy. Romantic comedy is a comedy. Actually, this type of comedy, comedies were evolved in Elizabethan England. Such comedy represents a love affair that involves a beautiful and engaging heroine. The course of this love does not run smooth, yet overcomes all difficulties to end in a happy union. Many of the boy meets girl plots of later writers' instances of romantic comedy. There are several instances, As You Like It, Midsummer Night's Dream, and here we may mention the concern of Northrop Frye in Anatomy of Criticism, where he talked about that most of the problems in romantic comedy, specifically the Shakespearean comedy, are resolved when they move to the outer side of the town. Say, for example, in case of Rosalind, when Rosalind went to the forest of Arden to search for his uncle, and there she was fascinated by other characters, and the play ends. Most parts of the plays were enacted in the forest of Arden, and the plays came to an happy end simply by the reconciliation of all conflicts, and it was simply possible because of the influence of the environment. The eco-critical perspective is important to reconciliate and to merge everything into happy ending. Comedy of humors. This is a particular type of comedy. This comedy emerged out of the concept of humor. Humor, according to the medieval astrophysics, they thought that human body was controlled by 4 types of humor. Any imbalances of any humor can cause a typical temperament. Say, for example, there are four humors: blood, flame, cholera, and melancholy. When we become angry, actually, it is due to the pressure of the blood, it is due to the excessive uh, agitated feeling that we feel agitated, we feel angry, and other subsequent emotions. Flame actually means the flame, the cough. It also determines the temperament of human being. And cholera. Cholera causes the fading tendency, the weakness, the fading away. These are the tendencies. And melancholy makes you sad. There is a book called Anatomy of Melancholy by Robert Burton. If you go through the book has been written in 3 volumes. The first book describes the causes of melancholy, and the second book deals with the symptoms of melancholy, and the third one deals with how to cure melancholy. The best example of melancholy character was Hamlet. Next, it is the Comedy of Manners. It is mostly related to the upper class society. It deals with the follies, misconceptions, etiquette of the upper class society. The best examples are Love's Never Lost, Much Ado About Nothing, Congress, The Way of the World, The Country Wife, etc. City comedy and farce. City comedy is a popular form of drama in the Jacobean and Caroline theatre and associated with the playwrights of Ben Jonson, Thomas Middleton, John Marston, and Philip Messenger. City comedy is based on the principles of Roman New Comedy but brings its satiric eye to bear on the financial dealings and sexual immoralities of a newly emergent mercantile class. Farce is also a subtype of comedy designated to provoke the audience to simple, hearty laughter, belly laughs. The best example of farce can be seen in the performance of Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson. I think all of you have gone through the episodes of Mr. Bean, and somewhat it is akin to the performance of Charlie Chaplin. Farce. Look at the picture. These are the characteristics of farce. The dramatic examples of farce is the importance of being honest. Look at the characteristics. The belly dance, the physical laughter actually. Situational comedy, sitcom. Sitcom, clipping, or situational comedy is a genre of comedy centered upon a fixed set of characters who carry over from episode to episode. Sitcoms can be contrasted with stretch comedy and stand-up comedy. Sitcoms originated in radio, but today are found mostly in television as one of the dominant narrative forms. Some of the British sitcoms, Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads, Bless This House, etc. High and low comedy and slapstick. George Meredith, in his The Idea of Comedy, has classified comedy to 2 sections: the high comedy and low comedy. High comedy actually is the intellectual comedy, which is quite akin to the commedia erudita, and low comedy, which deals with normal people, deals with jokes, gags, and slapstick humor, and boisterous or clownish physical activity. It is therefore one of the common components of farce. Slapstick comedy, look at the picture. I hope by observing the picture you can understand what is slapstick comedy. Look, a man is cutting the hair of another man by using a scissor, which is thrice bigger than the hands of that particular man. And look, the man is playing a violin, and the stick of the violin goes into the eyes of the another man. Actually, this is called the slapstick comedy. Slapstick is a style of humor involving exaggerated physical activity that exceeds the boundaries of normal physical comedy. Slapstick may involve both intentional violence and the violence by mishap, often resulting from inept use of props such as saws, ladders, etc. Now we come to the most important part of my presentation, which is the purpose of comedy. The purpose of comedy is not only to laugh people, but to give pleasure by laughing people. Look, each has certain social and philosophical purpose. From the beginning, comedy served different purposes. Look, from the beginning, while comedy of Aristophanes sustained an overt political and satirical commentary, comic drama was encouraged to move away from the current affairs at early stage and in its development. The Aristophanic comedy was solely for the purpose of satire, solely for the purpose of pointing out the errors, and it did so violently by using invectives and other jarring languages. Aristotle tells us that Crates, who first abandoned the form of a lampoon means the public criticism, and began to construct the universalized stories of and plots. And by the time Menander, nearly a century later, comedy has ceased to intervene in the issues of government, at least explicitly. Instead, comedy was commended for its realistic representation of the human condition, famously moving the early Alexandrine scholar Aristophanes of Byzantine to ask, "Oh, Menander and Life, which of you is imitating which?" Donatus and Congreve. By the 4th century AD, Donatus, a grammarian who taught at Rome, wrote that comedy has two purposes. Number one, comedy can preach. Comedy can preach about the ethical values of human being, to inculcate ethical values of human being. And the second purpose is it can enrich our academic quality. Under the sterile conditions, Donatus declared comedy to be essentially didactic, mirroring everyday life and schooling us in practical ethics. He also emphasized the academic qualities of comedy, arguing that good comedy should be built according to sound rhetorical principles. After Donatus, there came William Congreve. William Congreve, in response to the clergyman Jeremy Collier attack in him in particular and theatre in general, he declared that men are to be laughed out of their vices in comedy. Men are to be laughed out of their vices in comedy. The purpose of comedy is to point out the follies, the faults, the vices of the character, and thereby to rectify the character of that particular person. So comedy does the corrective, constructive purpose to build something anew, to build something by pointing out the faults. The business of comedy is to delight as well as to instruct, and as a vicious people are made ashamed of their follies and faults by seeing them exposed in a ridiculous manner, so are good people at once both warned and diverted at their expense. George Meredith, I have already pointed out, George Meredith divided comedy into two sections, high comedy and low comedy. He, in his essay on comedy, personified comedy as a comic spirit. Although metaphorically enlarging it by personifying comedy as a benign spirit monitoring human behavior. So comedy is a benign spirit which maintains and which tutors, monitors human behavior. Whenever they walks out of proportion, human being, whenever they means human beings, whenever they walks out of proportion, overblown, affected, pretentious, bombastical, hypocritical, pedantic, fantastically delicate, whenever it sees them self-deceived or hoodwinked, given to run riot in idolatries, drifting into vanities, congregating in absurdities, planning short-sightedly, plotting dementedly, whenever they are at variance with professions and violate the unwritten but perceptible laws binding them in consideration one to another. Whenever they offend sound reason, fair justice, are false in humility or mired with conceit, the spirit overheard will look humanly malign and cast an oblique light on them, followed by volleys of silvery laughter. This is the comic spirit. So he imagined comedy as the guiding principle of human behavior. Now we come to the 20th century criticism or interpretation of comedy. 20th century, there are several critics who did not subscribe to the comedy's didactic purpose. Most of the critics before 20th century, they ascribed that the comedy must have the purpose to instruct, to didact, to rectify the vices of human being. But the 20th century critics, they denied the fact completely. They tried to explore comedy in different ways, into different avenues. Like Maurice Charney see a central methodological absence in the contemporary discussion of the form that leaves us with no common assumptions and no set of conventions by which we can agree on how to speak about comedy. Actually, he saw the lack to discuss that particular poetic genre called comedy. Harry Levin, another critic, see comedy as a conflict between the emotions of joviality and sobriety. Sobriety means seriousness. A perennial war of the laughers against the non-laughers, of playboys against killjoys, locked in an eternal battle of the world views. According to Harry Levin, comedy is a constant conflict or battle between the laughers and the non-laughers, the positivities and the negativities. Okay. Eric Segal, another important critic, Eric Segal. He is simply famous for his book Death of Comedy. He charted out a history of the function of comedy. And there he pointed out that comedy did not exist. Comedy is dead. The history of Western comedy plots a long line of descent from the euphoric heights of Aristophanes' triumph to the resignation of the theatre of inadequacy, represented by the work of the Samuel Beckett. According to this thesis, vigorous expressions of the life begin to fade and become more complicated and contingent at history and experience instructors in cynicism and boisterous optimistic comic forms are rendered increasingly untenable. I hope all of you have gone through the name of the play, Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot. This play actually picturizes three characters. They are waiting for someone. It's called Godot. Godot symbolizes many things. Godot, maybe he is a god, maybe he is a stranger, maybe he is someone they cannot totally deny. Godot may be a person, Godot may be a woman, Godot may be a goddess, Godot may be a god. There is no specific significance, there is no specific meaning of the meaning of Godot in the particular play called Waiting for Godot. Beckett, in Waiting for Godot, epitomizes comedy's fate. The drama will have no happy ending. Indeed, it will have no ending at all. There will be no renewal or rejuvenation. For whatever Godot may represent, whether salvation or erotic reward, one thing is clear: the traditional happy ending is no longer possible because comedy is dead. Actually, the play portrays the distorted version of comedy. Actually, comedy epitomizes hope, aspirations, positive vibes. But this play does not have any positive vibes, any positive hope. The waiting is going on and on and on. There is no positive response from the other end. Another critic, Francis MacDonald Concord, in his Origin of Attic Comedy, related comedy with the fertility beliefs, fertility rites of the ancient Greek culture. He wrote, besides the distribution of benign influence, these processions, the phallic processions, have also the converse magical intent of defeating and driving away bad influences of every kind. The phallus itself is no less a negative charge against the evil spirits than a positive agent of fertilization. Then we come to the interpretation of C.L. Barber. According to C.L. Barber, comedy is essentially Saturnalian. Saturnalian means Saturnalian comedy is neither satirical nor political but devoted to a process Barber calls release and clarification. Release refers to the loosening of the social controls during holidays and leads Barber, like Freud, to ascribe some comic pleasure to the redistribution of mental energy nominally devoted to social conformity so that the energy normally occupied in maintaining inhibitions is freed for celebration. Clarification is comedy's ability to reaffirm the positive relationship of humanity to its environment, a heightened relationship between man and nature. Comedy thereby has the dual function of celebrating human relationships and merrymaking, while mocking what it considers unnatural, baiting killjoys and miserly characters who fail to observe the feast or show some perverse aversion to happiness. I told you a little bit about North of Fry. I do not go to the details. This is the structure that Fry formulated, commonly related to spring, life cycle, birth, and myth of birth, summer, romance, youth. If you go to the Wikipedia, you will find this. Actually, this chart is taken from the Anatomy of Criticism by Northrop Frye. The detailed description of Frye's criticism. Frye's criticism. It's the picture of Northrop Frye. Next, we are at the fragment of my presentation. Mikhail Bakhtin's interpretation of comedy. Mikhail Bakhtin is important simply because of two reasons. According to Bakhtin, comedy performs two roles. Number one, he in his book Rabelais and His World argues for the existence of two synchronous but contradictory worldviews during the medieval period. In medieval period, the official culture was the church culture and the other culture was the common people, the normal culture. The official culture, which he characterizes as ecclesiastical, somber, exploring profanity and suppressing the body, driven by the bureaucracy of the church and the administration of race, is contrasted with what he calls the culture of the marketplace. He contrasted the official culture with the marketplace culture, the popular and the boisterous voice of the people. The marketplace is a totemic location for Bhakti. This territory, look at the contradiction, the contrasting nature of these two places. And one is the church, which is a sacred place, which is a place of God, where everything is pure, everything is holy, sacred, and the marketplace, where everything is topsy-turvy, everything is not in an order, everything is very chaotic, everything is very unhealthy, etc., etc. This territory, writes Bakhtin, was a popular second world within the official medieval world order and was ruled by the special type of relationship. Officially, the palaces, churches, institutions, and private homes were dominated by hierarchy and etiquette, but in the marketplace, a special kind of language was heard, almost a language of its own, quite unlike the language of the church, palace, courts, and institutions. The language of the marketplace is the idiom of the plebeian classes. Plebeian means common people. The expression of the natural feeling, coarse, unlettered, and unmediated by the expectations of formality. This is a vision of culture at ease with and making fun of, graphic description of sexual activity, bodily functions, ridiculing officials and officialdom, and violating officially designated rules of etiquette and decorum. The world of the marketplace operates according to what is essentially a comic logic, one that runs parallel to official, serious, and improving culture, laughing at it and sometimes violently humiliating it. Another version of Bakhtin is his theory of carnival. Actually, carnival literally means a putting away of meat, but carnival means a gathering of a lot of people. It is like a fair. It is like, I think you must have heard the carnival, the Durga Puja carnival in West Bengal, organized by the government of West Bengal, where all types of people will present themselves, and fear is fear in a sense that there will be no hierarchy, there will be no king, there will be no common people. Common people become the king. Common people become the position of a higher people. Higher people decreases to the level of the common people. Normal people becomes eccentric. The mad people become common people. So carnival is a place. Carnival is a typical activity of comedy, which makes everyone equal. Which is a comedy has a leveling force. Is a leveling force. So comedy makes everyone equal. Comedy has the power to democratize everything. Comedy breaks the hierarchies of society to make all types of people equal. So this is the sole purpose propounded by Bakhtin in his theory of carnival and carnivalesque, actually theory carnivalesque. So this is the end of my presentation. I'd like to request all of you to go through these books for further reading. Comedy by Andrew Stott, Ruthless Publication. M.H. Abrams, you have gone through The Death of Comedy by H. Segal, The Nature of Roman Comedy, Study in Popular Entertainment by George E. Duckworth, Tragedy Clifford H. New Handbook of Literary Terms, British Drama, A Historical Survey from Beginning to the Present by Allardyce Nicholl. So this is the end of all. If anyone has any question, please ask me. Thank you. If anybody has any question, please ask me. Am I audible to all? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Is there any question from students' side? Any question from anybody else? Should I end or throw?
Yes, sir, you might. I can also end the live stream also. And would you like to have? Would you like me to check if there is any question in the YouTube live
Okay,
chat?
okay. You can check it and let me know.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay. Just give me a minute. No, sir. Unfortunately, we do not have any question in the YouTube live chat also.
Okay, is there if there will be any question in future, you can contact me or you can send me by email or WhatsApp, whatever is feasible for you. Okay. So thank you everyone
Thank you, sir.
for your patience. Thank you. Should I leave now?
Yes, sir. You might. Others are leaving also.
Okay, thank you.